Welcome to the Performance Enhancing Podcast. It's like steroids for your brain. A podcast for people that want the best info, but just don't have the time. Get your podcast fix with the Cliff Notes versions of your favorite podcasts. No fluff, just the actionable golden nuggets. Having this much knowledge at your fingertips should be downright illegal. So get ready for another dose of Performance Enhancing Podcast with Satori Prime. Here's your host, Ilan Ferdman.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Performance Enhancing Podcast with your host, Ilan Ferdman. We have an amazing show today. So if any of you guys have followed any of my obsession with neuromarketing, today is going to blow your mind. I actually ran across a book called The Cell Effect by an author called Peter Lisoskie. And I managed to get him onto the show. So I'm really excited. He's really going to blow our mind. So just a little bit about Peter before we jump right in. So he's been in product development and business development for over 25 years. He's been speaking on radio. He's done public speaking in all sorts of industries. He's also responsible for delivery of over 400 products to the marketplace. He holds 6 patents. And these products range anywhere from $2 to $8 million in gross revenue. But the real reason that he blew me away is that selling, as we know, or as we're finding out, I should say, with the expansive field of neuroscience, is more scientific and more. We can use the brain basically to persuade and convince people or sell people. And his book that I picked up is all about how to trigger certain things in the brain to actually sell your prospects. And it's interesting when I say sell, I know it's kind of a misnomer, so we're going to clarify that. But once we started speaking, Peter actually let me know that he's coming out with a new product just now called Story Selling Blueprint Formula. And you know how much I love stories and using them to sell. So I thought, hey, why not come on here? We'll talk a little bit about what you've done and you can share with us what you're about to launch. So with that, Peter, welcome to our show.
Great. Thanks, Ilan. I really appreciate it. It's nice to be on here. And I am excited, to share this with people. I'll start with kind of the backstory of,
Please.
How did this all come into being? Years ago, this goes way back in technology. I graduated college in about 84, but in 94, I had a business I launched that was it was called the Business Toolbox, Ilan, and it was actually after I had run a very large scale Apple IIgs user group. Those are in the Smithsonian now, right?
I remember those computers well.
Yeah. Okay. So I had one of the largest in the country, and I got this idea about how to take customers from prospects all the way up to strategic advisors. And so I said, okay, I'm going to launch this company. It's a publishing company called the Business Toolbox. And I wrote my first book called Customers for Keeps. You can Google it. You can see it up there. It's out of print now, but it actually was the forefather to a lot of customer relationship management stuff. Because talked about how you work with customers, through these different stratifications.
Yeah. So
I launched this book. I sent the manuscript out to all these big thought leaders at the time. Guys like Brian Tracy and all these guys. Well, I had this little teeny office, and it was like in this basement. There was like no windows. I had a phone and a Mac Plus, one of those beige Mac Pluses that I had written on it. This thing, and I get this call. And this guy on the other end, he said, hey, he didn't introduce himself. He just said, hey, I read your manuscript and this is really interesting stuff. He said, he asked me, he said, so what's your story? And thinking that, okay, he wants to know about the book and all this, I immediately jumped into, well, the book's about this and it does this. And he goes, no. He interrupted me. He goes, what's your story? I want to know about you and about what makes you tick, why you did this book, and what passion you bring to the marketplace. So, by that time, Ilan, I was like sweating bullets because I was like, oh my God. Well,
what's my story?
Yeah, what's my story? So I proceeded to tell him about my passion, right? Well, what happened was that guy ended up being J. Conrad Levinson of the guerrilla marketing empire, right? Yeah. So, and he wrote, there's a testimonial on the back of the book. He wrote he wrote one, you can check it out there. But that was you have defining moments, right, in your business careers. And that was a huge defining moment for me of understanding, wow, if I could tell my story and stories to people, it would just blow them away. So if you backtrack just a little bit before that, I had another defining moment because I was right after I got out of college, about 1984, I ran across this guy named Joseph Campbell. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you know him from The Hero's Journey, right? And
Yep.
and I had back at the time they had VHS cassette tapes, right? That was our technology back then. And I was sitting and I had this was my first place. It was this little broken down house, and I had a little TV, and I was watching these tapes. Now, at that time, because I kind of, the 400 products, I've done stuff for, consumer products for Nike. I've done payment transactions. I've done bioscience, biomedical, but I got to travel all over the world, which is kind of cool before I got into, the small business space. And so I had seen a lot of cultures all over Asia, all over Europe, all over South America. And I was sitting here and I was watching this guy's tapes on the power of myth. And it was like a thing, it hit me like a ton of bricks, because I said, you know what? It doesn't matter where you go and what language people speak and what ethnic background, they have an underlying, very similar human condition on how they process things. Okay. Yeah. And so this blew me away. So, I took that plus my conversation with J. Conrad Levinson. I said, I need to start talking to people in terms of stories, because it's things that they get. But the key thing is the stories that I tell, they have to connect to a person's inner dialogue and their core desires. Okay. Yeah. And so, I talk about this in my other product, the Croc Brain thing. What people need to understand, your listeners need to understand, is that selling with benefits and features and all that stuff is all wrong.
Yep.
It's not the way to speak to people. So the storytelling formula is, it gets into talking to them from an inner dialogue and core desire. So let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah,
so
let's talk about
what are these?
I just want to interject one thing real quick, because I've said this before on our show, that where I see from a marketing standpoint, and you and I have spoken about marketing before, but I think what happened in the world with online marketing is, at first it was kind of wild, wild west, right? And people just talked a bunch of shit at people. And it was so new and people were buying stuff. And then Google killed everyone and got rid of them. And everyone's like, well, I don't know what to do now. And then Facebook, people started doing the same thing. And Facebook is now kicking everyone off. And I've said this to people for the last probably 3 years. I said, the only people that will succeed in the future are those that can share their stories that move people to trust and believe them. And then they'll then buy stuff from you. It's not about selling something to someone. It's about building that relationship. And I think this is why conversation is so important for people to listen to, because if you know how to share your story in a way that actually connects with someone at the inner level, then you've really struck a chord. And that's why I'm really excited that you're here. So sorry, I just wanted to interject that, but go ahead.
No. It's so true. And, I tell you, here's the thing, Ilan, you and I are probably a lot alike, along with a lot of your listeners. And that is, you know what, you got to boil all this stuff down so you can carry it in your head. It's got to be simple enough that it becomes part of you. And so I tell people, look, when you tell stories get attention. They make that trust connection. Yep. They build that desire and they inspire action. Yes. And I'm going to go through a Princeton, because I like the science stuff, because I'm a technical guy. There's a Princeton University research study about storytelling, and I'll get into that in a second.
Awesome.
So this whole thing with inner dialogue is really inner dialogue. If you could boil down, there's a lot of things going on in the brain, but primarily as it relates to selling and purchase decisions, it's all about doubt and fear. And you know this to be true too, Ilan. I mean, if we look at buying something, I'm not talking about like an impulse buy, like a pack of gum. I'm talking about things like you sell, I sell, bigger ticket products like cars, houses, even a few $100 products. People, they go through this, they start this inner dialogue of doubt and fear. It's like, and it's in terms of what if, like, well, what if I buy Ilan's package and it doesn't work and I spend all that money? Or what if I go to start this business and I fail and go into bankruptcy, right? Yep. So there's all those, we have these inner dialogues. It's not that we're crazy people. It's just that this is the way we process stuff. Okay. So And when we talk to people, that's the outer extension of inner dialogue. Okay. Now, on the flip side of the fence is your core desires. Now, here's how you know when you're talking to someone and they're expressing their core desire, Ilan. If you ask them, hey, if I were to ask you as it relates to maybe like online marketing or something that you're selling to them, if I could just, and then they finish the sentence, that is their core desire. Or if I could only, okay? So when they're expressing those things, they are telling you a core desire. And here's what happens. We're going to get into the whole hero's journey here, and what happens in the mind is that it is a battle in the mind between doubt and fear and core desire to see which one's going to win out. Okay.
So those three, it's the battle between fear, desire, and their core. And their core desire.
Yes, if you could, core desire and fear is the same thing. It's boiled down to fear. So it's a battle between fear and desire.
Got it.
And this is what happens in the inner dialogue. And here's the thing, Ilan, you know this to be true because we both know Frank Kern and things. We talk about the 3 levels of influence, right?
Yeah.
First, you got the guy in what we say about our products, right? That's one level of influence. Then you got social proof, right? We do that, right? It's like all the people who are talking about your product and things. That's another level of influence. But the highest level of influence is what I think I can get as a result from using this particular piece of knowledge, product, or service, right?
Yeah.
That's the highest level of influence. So if I can connect my product or service through these series of stories that I'm going to share with a person's core desire, so they believe themselves they can get that result, it will overcome the fear and the purchase process will happen.
Is this why you said in the book, and I thought this was really interesting, you said that testimonials aren't really effective, and you actually called them sales noise.
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about? Is that because that third level of them actually convincing themselves that they can do it is way more effective?
Exactly, Ilan. That is the most powerful. And this is the holy grail. Yeah. Because the big question is, well, how do we in print or online or copywriting help that person go through that process of showing themselves that, yes, I could get this result. And this is where these stories come into play. Some people like Frankie calls them internal decision triggers, but this is what's happening. I'm just giving people a how-to formula to tell stories to help grease the skids to make that happen.
So right now, all of the listeners are probably skidding their cars off the highway and going, oh my God, he's about to give us the formula. Please give us the formula.
Well, we're going to get to that. We're going to talk about the hero's journey, but I want to go through a couple other things here that before we get into talking about Joseph Campbell's hero's journey and the development of these stories. Okay. So that we talked about inner dialogue, core desire. The next thing in selling I've learned over the years and years that I've done this and built businesses is that everyone, no matter who they are, it's always about status and opportunity. It's status, loss, or gain, opportunity, loss, or gain. And I talk about that in the book. You saw there's a sales conversion zone, right? So, and again, guys, here's the thing. I'm not talking about status in terms of like, oh, well, look at me. But if you think about it, right, if status was not important to all of us, we all would be driving around Toyota Yaris's. There would be no Bentleys. There would be no Mercedes. We want to gain and improve. We want to, elevate ourselves and in the eyes of our social community. Think about it. Let's go back to the caveman days, Ilan, right? When, you were in the cave people, right? You didn't want to be the little cave guy that got beat with a stick by the leader. You wanted to be the caveman leader, right? Yep. So this has kind of been built into our evolution and DNA, in that this status and opportunity is very, 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 very important. Now, in opportunity, that's the status. The opportunity is we don't want to have opportunity loss. Now, going back to the evolutionary times back in caveman days, opportunity loss would be like, hey, I'm out with my spear in the savannah, and all of a sudden a cheetah jumps out and kills me. That's opportunity loss. So, but these days we look at things in terms of opportunity loss as far as loss of money. In other words, that's an example. Like if I pay for this product and it doesn't do what it says it does, then I lose this whole money. And then we have these these goofball things, which I'm not a huge believer in guarantees anyway. But, we try to say, well, we're going to relieve the risk because everybody's now doing this as the herd in marketing by giving people these guarantees. And I'm telling you, just like the guarantees and testimonials are becoming weaker and weaker and more in the noise because so many people are doing it, and people have been burned so many times that their level of skepticism is super high.
So let me ask you about that. Well, I'm going to save that question for a second because I want to come back to guarantee and testimonials because I think for a lot of people listening, that's going to be really important. But I just want to point out one thing about status because we spoke about cars, and I just don't want it to occur to people like, well, I'm not, materialistic or anything like that. So I just want to expand it. Status, guys, can be anything. So if you're one of like the smart people or you have that thing, then your status was to be the best in class. Always be the best. If you're at work, you're trying to be better than someone else and be the best, in that arena. In your group of friends, you might dress a certain way or do certain things, whether it's cooking or hosting or whatever. That's status. That's all. So it's not just this like car thing. And I didn't want people to get stuck on that. I don't care. There's no person on the planet that's not driven by wanting to excel their status. Period.
Exactly. Ilan, it could go back just to the family dynamic. If you have a loved one, you want to be elevated in the status of their eyes.
Yes. Because
that matters to you. It can be unrelated. You're exactly right on. It's not just about buying things. It's about we want status across the board in relationships and family and love and, all those kinds of things. So it's not, it has had a bad connotation, but it's not, if you look at what it really is, it's not bad.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to because I think if people heard like, well, I never want to drive a Bentley, they're going to be like, well, I don't know. And that I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. Okay. So that's good.
So now jump forward.
So we got, an inner dialogue, core desire, status, and opportunity. Now we're going to talk about mental triggers. Now,
well, hold on. Before we do that, I want to talk about guarantees and testimonials.
Okay. Sure.
Can we do that for a second?
Yeah.
Because I use them. I know a lot of us have been taught to use them. Is there something that you can recommend as an alternative to that thing that everyone's been told, like, put this guarantee and put this many testimonials and things of that nature?
That is a really good question. And here's my answer for everybody listening. If you have done your job at telling the right sequence of stories that connect with their inner dialogue and core desire, you will not need guarantees and you will not need testimonials.
Brilliant.
Why? Because you are connecting directly inside their brain, which matters most to them.
Brilliant.
We use those. I'm telling you, I go against the herd because I tell people all the time, this whole thing about, sales scripts and trial closings, and it's a bunch of hoo-ha. It was taught by sales gurus that didn't know what they were doing trying to make a buck. It's the same thing with this. We use testimonials and guarantees as a crutch because we didn't do a good job of connecting with their inner dialogue and core desires.
Brilliant.
I'm just saying flat out. So, and I know this because I've done this for years in the trenches, selling lots of different kinds of products. Now, going over, does that answer your question?
Absolutely. That was perfect.
Okay. So going over now to mental triggers. Okay. Now, here's the thing. These are what I call tipping points, okay? And you'll know this when I say them. Things like anticipation or imagine this or hope or scarcity. These mental triggers are these tipping points that bring people to the next level or the next commitment. See, the thing about sales, and you know this to be true already because I've followed you and your brother and things, is that in selling, it's not about, okay, I present and they buy. It's about a series of small commitments they make along the way, with the culmination being the buy.
Yes.
Okay. So people have to understand that these mental triggers, all they're doing is they're providing tipping points to say, hey, come with me on your journey. Here's your core desire. Imagine if you could achieve this core desire. And it gets them to that next level of commitment. It could be opt-in in online. It could be watch my video sales letter. It could be buy the price. There's a lot of these little commitments, but these mental triggers, it pushes people over the edge.
Yeah.
See, telling stories, we teach this in the workshop of how to use these mental triggers as it relates to speaking to their internal dialogue and their core desire. Okay. Now, going to the last piece here before we get into the hero's journey is, when I do a lot of radio interviews, I always give a science lesson just because I'm a science guy and I like neuroscience. But just so you guys know how powerful this really is, Princeton University, their research center, they did a study not too long ago. And I call this the Vulcan mind meld effect. You remember Spock and, he put his finger, read the mind, right? Because we're both kind of geeky. But what this is they use what's called EEG technology. That's electroencephalogram. And it's like the swimmer's cap that with the electrodes on the cap. And it measures the synaptic electrical currents between the neurotransmitters, right?
Yep.
But here's the freaky thing. This is why the stories are so powerful, Ilan, is when they did that, they found that the storyteller and the story receiver had the exact same brain pattern.
Wow.
Identical. So this is why it's so powerful. When you tell a story, this is why they get remembered and why they have such power. And you know this to be true because have you ever watched a tearjerker movie, maybe with your significant other, and it's like you almost start crying in the movie, right? Or you hear an NFL football story, and it's like I just watched. There was a guy that he got ALS, and I was almost bawling like a baby.
Yeah.
The reason is because the story is told, we become the character.
Yeah.
Because the brain pattern is exactly the same.
Yeah.
So guys, if you're listening to this, and I'm glad Ilan is letting me share this with all of you. I hope you understand how powerful storytelling can be. And I'm not talking, we're talking about as it relates to sales, but I'm talking about when you're talking to your kids, when you're talking to your significant other, spouse, when you're talking to your family or friends. It is the most powerful way to connect with a person almost on a DNA level.
Yeah.
Okay. So that, that really is the science behind this whole thing. And that was another huge aha for me, was like, wow, if I could come up, I was telling stories, but I never had a really good, systematic way. And, being an engineer by training, I thought if I could develop a process here where I could lead people through, a series of stories that take them on their hero's journey, we'd be onto something pretty big. Okay?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how how this all happened. So the thing about it is, if you look at stories, stories go back to the dawn of man, right? You can even go to the caves where they have petroglyphs. We've been told bedtime stories. Companies tell stories. What are they called? Brand, right? So we're very used to hearing these stories and remembering. Now, I'm going to tell you a little experiment I did, and then we'll get into the hero's journey, just to prove the point on how powerful stories are as far as getting remembered. So I have this story that I like to tell, especially because I do consulting with a limited number of people, just like you and your brother do. And so I was telling this story about the sailor and the fisherman, okay? And it's about a 4 or 5 minute story. But what I did, I do a lot of worldwide webinars, Ilan, and I had several hundred people on this webinar from all over the world, just like you do. And I was talking and I said, look, I'm going to show you just how powerful a story really is as far as getting remembered. So I told this story about the sailor and the fisherman. It was a fairly long story. And then I said, now here's what I want you to do. I do not want you to take notes. I want you just to sit and listen to this story. This will be your first time through. I'm going to ask you, not 5, not 10. I asked them 17 questions about the story after the story. And then I got the results back in the chat. 95% of everyone got 15, 16, or 17 out of 17 right.
Wow.
From listening to it one time. So you see, stories you implant, and the cool thing about it is, I talk about this as far as limbic implants in the Crockpoint formula. But what's happening is your stories are working on your prospects and customers long after you're gone.
Yeah.
They're very, very powerful.
That's how we plant. I think that's how we plant seeds over and over. And I want to just say something again that you said, because I think it's really smart. Yes, I positioned Peter on here as he's amazing at helping you sell X, right? But there's something else to it. And I love that you said it with how you are with your kids or your spouse, or for a lot of our listeners, they're coaches in their own right. And so, I know in our masterminds, for example, when we're teaching people, we use stories all the time because I can talk theory to someone, but I can share a story with them, even something that I personally went through or a student of ours went through. And I know that that's going to have way more impact than me just showing them something on the computer screen. So it's much deeper than just trying to sell someone something. It's like Peter said, it connects you at, let's call it brain level, soul level, whatever you want. And that's the reason that people become fanatic about you and your brand. So it's amazing.
Yeah, and you're exactly right, Ilan. And I'll tell you, you guys, if you want to try your own experiment, here's how you prove this to yourself. Because I tell people all the time with my stuff that I teach, go out and try it, prove it to yourself. If it doesn't work, then don't come back. But I guarantee you're going to come back. Is this going to work? So for all you guys listening, pick a story that may be about your childhood or something that not a famous bedtime story, but something maybe somebody hasn't heard. Go to one of your friends. Tell them the story and then come up with 5 or 6 questions based on that story right after they heard it and watch what happens. They will remember almost every little detail, down to the color of the clothes. If you had said she was wearing a blue sweater, this is how the brain works because it is connecting. Remember, I talked about the Princeton study. It's identical. Okay. Mm-hmm. So it's just amazing. So now here's what we're going to do. We're going to move now into Joseph Campbell's hero's journey because I'm sure a lot of your listeners want to go, okay, well, Peter and Ilan, this is great. This is really exciting. But, okay, how do I do this?
Exactly.
So we're going to cover that now. Okay. So what I'm going to do, guys, just because, it's always good to have a story that goes along with the teaching. I'm going to use, because most all of you have probably seen the movie Star Wars or one of the movie Star Wars with, Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and Princess Leia, all the characters, right? So we're going to talk about this hero's journey and storytelling or story selling in terms of what happened in Star Wars. Okay. And that'll really help you guys remember what I'm teaching you. All right. Perfect. So here's what happens. If you can visualize a circle, and if you draw a horizontal line through the middle of the circle, at the top is what we call our known world, and at the bottom is what we call our unknown world. Okay. Yep. And so everyone is out there sitting in what we call what Joseph Campbell calls the ordinary world or your known world. And this is where, hey, I get up, I have breakfast with my wife and kids, I go to work, I come home, I watch TV, I go to bed, I get up, That's our ordinary world, right? And so, but here's the thing. I haven't met a person yet. I mean, there are a lot of people that are very happy with their life, but there's always like a little nagging feeling, or there's this little internal dialogue that is telling us, my life could be better, or I could do something. Yeah, see, because it's safe. We all do this, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, or if I could get like maybe for you, if you could say, if I could get an international syndication of Satori Prime podcast, take it to the next level. I mean, see, we have these things that even in our ordinary world, if you're very successful, you still have these things that are going on. And so, but it's the inner struggle between, I really want this, that's my core desire, versus, well, what if though it doesn't happen, which is the inner dialogue, right? So we're getting pulled. We're having this struggle that's going on, right? So if you think about it in terms of like what happened in Star Wars, right? So in here we have, right, we open the movie, Luke Skywalker, he's on planet Tatooine, he's there with his aunt and uncle, and he is, he's a farmer and they're fixing robots, and that's his ordinary world. He runs around in his speeder on the planet and all this kind of stuff, right? But there's these, and I teach this in the workshop, there's different character themes. So, but he even says, he has this character theme of wanderlust. He goes, I want to go be I want to be a Jedi Knight like my father. He doesn't know at that time that his father's Darth Vader, but he has this picture in his head of, I want to be more, right? Yeah. So this is his internal dialogue, his battle in the ordinary world, right? So here's the thing. In selling, we know that there's a problem, but we have a limited awareness of the solution until a herald comes. Okay. So if you think about it, what happens is this herald shows up and we have this, what's called a call to adventure. Now in the circle there, you're going towards, it's a kind of a clockwise thing. You're going, it's counterclockwise. You're going in this circle. So you're getting close to this call to adventure where you have to do what's called cross the threshold into the unknown. But that's a biggie. And especially in selling, that's the threshold of no thanks, I'm not interested, or no, right? So, but going back to this ordinary world, we're in this ordinary world. We have this limited awareness of the solution, but we get this call to adventure. So what happens in Star Wars, right? So R2-D2 and C-3PO, what happens? They get captured by the dark side, and they get sent down to planet Tatooine by those little midget people. They're running around, and they have the robots. And what happens is, right, Luke Skywalker and his uncle goes to buy some robots because I guess they help them with their farming and stuff, right? So Luke says, he sees C-3PO, and then C-3PO talks Luke into buying R2-D2, right? So they're back at the farm there, right, at their hut. And you remember in the movie, Luke is kind of goofing around with R2-D2, and he puts a screwdriver in him, and all of a sudden, pop, out comes this hologramic message, right? It's Princess Leia saying, Obi-Wan Kenobi, there's this disturbance in the Force and the dark side, right? It's a calling. And Luke is going, well, what's this all about? And so at dinner, he's talking to his aunt and uncle. He's going, that's how this message in this robot. And there's like this, they're talking about this Obi-Wan Kenobi. He goes, I wonder if it's that old Ben Kenobi on the other side of the planet. I remember the look on the uncle's face. He's going, oh my God, here we go. So he says, no, it's not him, and all that kind of stuff, right? So what happens is that this is now this thing is planted in Luke's mind. It's like, I wonder what this is. It looks like an important message, right? So he goes off, right? And the next thing you see in the movies, he's out there with his speeder way out in the middle of nowhere, and R2-D2 is with him, and they're going to, and remember the big sand people, they zap R2-D2, and they're about ready to kill one of the sand people, about ready to kill Luke, right? And who shows up? Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? Here's the herald. Now, in selling, you and I and everyone listening, we're the herald. We're calling this prospect on adventure. Okay, so Obi-Wan Kenobi says, Luke, you got to come to the Force and things like that, right? Because what happens is R2-D2 plays that little message, right? And it sees it, and he goes, Luke, it's your time. You got to follow the Jedi Knight way. And what does Luke do, right? He has what's called refusal of the call. We all do this, which is now our character thing. We're reluctant hero. It's like, well, I want to, but I got all these responsibilities in life, and I got this job, and I've got to feed my kid, and I just can't jump into this online thing with Satori Prime right now because it's not a right
scary.
time. It's scary. That's the doubt and fear. You see, and so Luke, what does Luke do? He says, I can't, the crops are about ready to go. I've got to help my uncle and all this kind of stuff. Right. So, the herald's there, Obi-Wan Kenobi. And what does Luke do? He takes off to go back home in his speeder. And as he gets close to the house, what does he see? He sees a bunch of smoke. He goes there. His whole house is burned down. And there he looks on the ground, and his aunt and uncle are barbecued. Wow. Now he's ticked off. Right. Yeah. So now his character theme is revenge. He goes, okay, that's it. I'm joining the become a Jedi Knight, and away I go. So he hooks up with Obi-Wan Kenobi, and where does he send him? He goes, you got to go to planet Dagobah, right? You got to go see this guy named Yoda. Well, now what happens is we have Luke now he's crossed the threshold. Why? Because his uncle got barbecued. So he is now getting into the unknown. Yeah. So here's the thing. In the story selling workshop that I teach, we help the people create what's called the herald story. And what the herald story does, just like it did for Luke Skywalker, is it creates such anticipation of what the result could be to develop desire that the person goes, okay, I'm willing to at least take a look at this. Now, it could be as simple as an opt-in, and online. But at least they're looking at and taking that next step into their call to adventure. Okay, they're at least interested. Let me take a look. Okay, you haven't sold anything. We're just taking that. Remember that next step of commitment, right? So what happens is Luke goes up there now, and he's up in planet Dagobah. And what does he do? You remember the story, he lands in this swamp. Now that swamp is the literal metaphor of his what? His fear. It's dark. And there's this big serpent that's running through the dang thing. And he's totally freaking out. He's got to get out. So he meets Yoda. So now we have these people called mentors and allies.
Hmm.
So there is, Han Solo, the Wookiee, Yoda. These people are all his mentors and allies. Just like people, this is where social proof and their family comes into play, because these are their mentors and allies. These are people that they trust, they look to for advice and guidance, right? So during the selling process, your prospect may go to these mentors and allies, okay? But you're there with them all the time as far as what you're doing in selling, okay? So what does he do? He learns, he starts learning. So we have to do what's called a transformation story. And this transformation story is where the person is going to be tested as far as fear of status and opportunity loss with core desire gain. But they're going to be learning some of the how-to things of what their life could be like if they grab this new elixir of knowledge. It could be like your product that you're selling in Satori Prime. It's like, here's some how-to things. Here's some things that will help you to achieve the result that you're looking for, that I know you want based on what you told me, core desire.
Yeah.
Does that make sense so far?
Absolutely.
Okay. So here's what happens is, so you're applying mental triggers, like you're in the transformation story, you're doing how-tos, but you're saying, look, imagine what this could be like. And can you anticipate what your life will be like when you have this? I mean, we both do it. It's like, look, if you use this, and we know our stuff works, if you use this, this is what it's going to do for your financial gain, or here's what it's going to do to grow your business. Okay. But the problem is that the prospect, especially if they have not, there's a different hero's journey, and it's more accelerated for people who are in your tribe, Ilan. I'm talking about people who are cold. They don't know us, right? So they're still doubting. They're still like, well, I'm not so sure. And they're still having this battle. And this is where you have the trials and tribulations that people have to go through. The trials and tribulations for Luke was, remember, he was going through and training with Yoda, and he was getting, hit in the head by that ball that was moving around, and he had his lightsaber, but he worked through those trials and tribulations until what happened? Until he was in the swamp and he lifted his spaceship out of what? Fear and doubt, and elevated it. That was a metaphor of confidence. Okay. So what's happening is, in this transformation story, not only are you giving them how to, and you're giving them these mental triggers, but you are building confidence in their ability to do the thing you said they could do. Remember, I said that's the highest form of influence.
Yeah.
This is why these stories are so powerful, because what you're doing is you're helping them be put into their own buying situation to know that they can achieve what you're telling them they can achieve.
And this,
not based on social proof.
And this, Peter, this is kind of what we were talking about before, where it actually is a process. It's not like, here's this 20-minute video sales letter and you can do it all in this video sales letter. This is like, here's this little micro video, go and do this. Like you said, hey, go try this out for yourself. If you get results, I think Frank Kern calls it results in advance, then come back and watch video 2. And then that kind of, you start building that relationship. Yes. So then eventually when you make that pitch, they're like, yes, whatever it is, yes, I want it, because you've already given them that kind of value. Yeah.
You got it, Ilan. And I mean, a lot of, like you, there's a lot of other big names. Ryan Dice and Frank call it indoctrination. You've mentioned that too. You can call it what you want, but the power of what I'm speaking to here is you're doing it with stories. And that's where they don't talk about that. Is they say, well, you can go do the video. And their stuff is fantastic. And I've learned a lot from both of them.
Same.
But the thing about it is that if you talk about the human condition, inner dialogue, and core desire, and telling stories and how powerful they are, you can still follow a process of what, Ilan's teaching you, what Ryan Dice is teaching you, what Frank Kern is teaching you, or what I'm teaching you, but you're doing it in the most powerful format, which is through stories. And yes, as you're going through, there's a story for each. There's one I didn't mention called the Sales Mag, and it gets attention. Then you have the Herald story, which crosses them across the threshold. Now we're in the transformation story, which helps them work through this inner dialogue, between doubt, fear, and desire. Okay. And so there is a process to this of how you take them around this circle of their hero's journey. Okay.
Yeah. All right, everyone. So I want to end part one there. I know this episode's been a little bit long, but I didn't want to just chop Peter right off in the middle there, because we're obviously going through the process of how to create these stories that help you sell, that help you create movement in your business, that inspire your prospects to actually take action. So we ended this part here with transformation, and we're going to continue both Luke's journey and how you can use that same exact process to get someone all the way back with Elixir in hand, actually making moves, strategic, powerful moves in their lives, and thereby connecting with you as the person that took them through that process. So I know this has been very dense, and I know it's a lot of information to take in. This might be a podcast that you want to listen to more than once. However, this is, like I've said in this podcast, the keys to the castle. If you can sell your story and connect with someone, like Peter said, at their brain level, then that becomes a fanatic follower of yours. And you've heard me say this before, you need 1,000 of those people and you will be a 7-figure earner in this lifetime. All right. Hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please head over to iTunes, leave us a rating and a comment. Love to hear from you guys as always. And we'll see you on part 2 with Peter Lisoskie. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you for joining us on this week's Performance Enhancing Podcast. We've taken this pep talk and created a custom action guide so you know exactly what action steps to take now to grow your business. Just head over to satoriprime.com/podcast and download it for free. Also, please leave a comment and rate this podcast on iTunes. It'll help us get the word out. Thanks for listening. Now, go and implement. We'll see you next time.